Hello, this is One for the Record. There's more breaking news. Let me read it to you. It's coming in off of KSWX. A blizzard warning is in effect until midnight. Steady snow will continue across south central Kansas. Also, I believe there was also blizzard warnings and airport closures. Let's see. Snow forces road closures in Texas and Oklahoma. And I believe also I had read earlier, see if I can find it on here, I believe there's a couple of smaller airports that are closed due to blizzard conditions. Let's see if I can see exactly where that is real quick. Oh my goodness, so much to go through. Stand by, because we're going live. Trying to get to it here. Okay. No. Oh. Record 17 inches of snow. Blankets, Amarillo, Texas, and historic blizzard. Let's see. Alrighty then. I know there's some airport closures, can't get to it right now. Just everybody be safe. See if I can get back to you now. Alright, where are you? There you are. Alright, everyone be safe. Hunker down. Check on the elderly. Good to be around someone that has a fireplace. Alrighty then, please be safe. No, I'll say it again. Do not have barbecues going inside the house for heat. You gotta have ventilation. Alrighty then, that's too dangerous. Alrighty then. Be safe, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care. I'm adding this to the report. Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diane, and today is February 25th, 2013. It is Monday afternoon, and here are your updates for today. Stop, dogs. Stop. We have breaking news from Paul BEGLEY's channel. There's an outbreak, according to the LA Times. I can't find it on breaking news yet, but there's an outbreak of tuberculosis, TB, in Los Angeles, California. So heads up, there was an outbreak in South Africa, and now all of a sudden it's in Los Angeles. So heads up, just so you know, when I learned in chiropractic school, TB likes dark, moist places. Alright? Keep that in mind. TB likes to grow in dark, moist places, habitats. Alright? Environments. So a heads up on that. Please, hygiene. Don't share cigarettes, food, you know, with someone who's coughing away. Alrighty then? Unless you know they're okay. Alright. A lot of air, sunlight. Alrighty then. Heads up on that. I'll give you more news on that later. I am attaching a bunch of videos. I might try to screencast him, but he's not saying anything different that I'm telling you. Alrighty then. Moving on, let's go to the Extinction Protocol 2012 and beyond. Scientists find remnants of lost continent off the coast of Africa. Heads up. It's probably a part of Atlantis, huh? Here we go. Alright. Let's see if I see any more information on that. Mauritius. They believe the microcontinent, which they have christened Mauritius, Mauritia, may also lie beneath Reunion Island and the Seychelles. Alrighty then. More. I don't know why they haven't found all this stuff before. Alrighty then. Also, let's see, here we go. Tuberculosis outbreak in downtown LA sparks federal effort. Also, New Zealand's White Island volcano stir sends out ash cloud. Heads up. So they're talking about it now. Wasn't on there a little bit ago. Alright, here we go. Moving on. Let's go to the Watchers watching the world. I'm also attaching a lot of UFO stuff. Another update on the Russian meteorite. There has been, when you do close-ups on the picture, it looks like it was a mothership releasing a bunch of UFOs. That's all I got to say. So, also, I have also a couple other videos I'm attaching on Fukushima and other things. Edgar Mitchell saying that he believes that we have been visited and there is definitely extraterrestrial life outside this planet. He says he believes it, definitely. Alright, moving on. Let's see, the Watchers watching the world. New tropical cyclone formed southeast of Cocos Islands, Australia. Okay, that's the only new stuff on there. Let's move on from that. Okay. ENENEWS, energy news. Now I'm attaching videos to this. Alright. So I'll put them after this video and some before this video. Alrighty, so stay tuned after this report. Alrighty then. Scientists, the melted core cracked the containment vessel. There really is no containment at Fukushima reactors. And that's from today. That was posted today. Also today, scientists discussed Fukushima disaster during highly informative 20-minute interview, and that's one of the ones that I'm attaching. Also today, Gunderson, Fukushima plume went down on ground unlike Chernobyl due to building wake effect. Radiation exposure going to be higher for people nearby. Also today, Caldecott, Dr. Caldecott, who's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Fukushima disaster, the worst thing that's ever happened. I've never seen anything so despicable in decades of being a doctor. She's an MD. Also, today, Japan agency reports 37 earthquakes near location of today's powerful magnitude 6.2. Heads up, they had a 6.2. I thought they were worried if there was a 5 or greater. Also today, powerful magnitude 6.2 quake hits eastern Japan, felt all over span of 500 kilometers. 13 quakes near same spot in 2 hours. Heads up, there might be a bigger one then. Heads up. Also today, Gunderson, we're getting reports from Fukushima of deformed children, troubled pregnancies after Fukushima. Oh, now there's an audio on that. We'll see if we can search out a video on some of that. Yesterday, Corbett report. Thyroid cancer skyrocketing right now in Fukushima. Guardian, the issue is bound to escalate further. Alrighty then. Moving on. U.S. Canada. Fox Seattle. Nuclear waste leaks at Hanford are far worse than we thought. And that was a couple days ago. Alrighty then. Nothing else is changing. Heads up around Hanford. Alrighty then. It is 1 day down. 4 to go before the weekend. Please be safe, and I'll see you on the flip side tomorrow. And stay tuned. I'm uploading a lot of stuff to this.
The Japanese basically lied about what happened with reactors for months. They said they were trying to prevent a meltdown, when in fact they knew that within the first couple days, all reactors 1, 2, and 3 at Fukushima Daiichi had melted down and completely, and they actually melted through the steel containment vessels So there was a worst case scenario that they were trying to hide. They even knew that at that time enormous amounts of radiation were released over Japan, and some of it even went over Tokyo. We have images from Los Alamos that show that happening. The U.S. was tracking it and giving the information to Japan, but the Japanese didn't warn their people. They allowed them to remain. Really, that's the reason why Obama came out and publicly said that American citizens should get 50 miles away from the plants. They'd like to retract that if they could. But, as of now, it's not nearly the same order of magnitude that's coming up, but there is about 1 billion becquerels of radiation per day that are coming off the melted cores. They're still having to pour 10 tons of water over each of the cores every day. They're trying to filter. They've set up elaborate filtration systems to filter out the radiation. But it's kind of jury-rigged, and since the melted cores crack the containment vessel, there really is no containment. So as soon as they pump the water in, it leaks out again. It's just kind of an ongoing process. It's not a good situation. The cores emit so much radiation, gamma radiation, that they actually disassociate the hydrogen and the oxygen in the water that's being pumped in. It creates a danger of a hydrogen explosion, so they are still also actively pumping nitrogen gas into the reactor cores to prevent hydrogen buildup and explosion. So if you consider that a cold shutdown or stable, then you probably work for the nuclear industry.
Personally, I have a lot of unanswered questions that neither the Japanese or U.S. governments, the nuclear power industry, and the mainstream news media seem interested in answering. For example, how much nuclear radiation was emitted in the atmosphere in the weeks and months after the disaster? Are the reactors continuing to leak radioactive particles into the air? How much radiation was leaked into the Pacific Ocean? Are the reactors continuing to leak radioactive water into the ocean? How far did the atmospheric radiation travel? Which parts of the world received the heaviest doses of radiation? How much of the ocean is contaminated by radioactive seawater? How far will the mass of radioactive seawater expand in coming years? Is it safe to eat tuna? What about Alaskan salmon? Is it safe to eat anything made with foodstuffs taken from the Pacific Ocean? How do we know whether rice and other food products were imported from Japan? How long will the radioactivity remain in the Pacific? What is the present state of the reactors? What are the dangers if Japan is hit by another mega earthquake? I've got a lot of other questions, and I'm trying to get the answers for you and me. I've invited Professor Steve Starr to the program today to help us. He serves as the senior scientist for Physicians for Social Responsibility. His articles on nuclear issues have been published by many organizations around the world, including the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. He is an expert on the environmental consequences of nuclear war. In 2011, Professor Starr addressed the UN General Assembly on the dangers that nuclear war poses to the human race. Professor Starr, welcome to True News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to answer some of these questions because the news media would like us to believe that Fukushima is old news, it went away, that's a subject from 2011, but you and I both know it hasn't gone away, it's not going to go away for a long time. Where do we start? Let's just start about, at the beginning of the crisis. At this point in time, what do we know about how much radiation was emitted into the atmosphere and the sea?
Well, an enormous amount was emitted. I try to use some of even the official sources from the Japanese, so these can't be questioned quickly by the nuclear industry. But in November 2011, the Japanese Science Ministry reported that long-lived radioactive cesium had contaminated 11,580 square miles of the land surface of Japan, and about 4,500 square miles, about almost the area the size of Connecticut, was found to have radiation levels that exceeded Japan's allowable exposure rates at that time. So that's a huge amount of area. Of course, Japan responded by, rather than evacuating, they just increased the acceptable exposure levels by 20
was going to ask if there are Japanese people still living there, and you just answered the questions. So the way the Japanese government... Yeah, go ahead.
There is an exclusion zone, which is important to know. That's about 230 square miles of area where people are not permitted to live. Parts of it they now allow people to visit during the day. Some parts are not visitable, are so high that you can't go in there without any sort of protective gear, and even that's probably not safe. And there's a exclusion zone around the destroyed Chernobyl reactor of about 2,000 square miles. So this is what happens when a reactor blows up and huge amounts of long-lived radionuclides escape. It does create intense areas of contaminated surface area that are around the reactors.
Presently, is there any radioactivity being released in the atmosphere at the present time?
Well, the state of the reactors right now, the Japanese basically lied about what happened with the reactors for months. They said they were trying to prevent a meltdown, when in fact they knew that within the first couple days, all reactors 1, 2, and 3 at Fukushima Daiichi had melted down and completely, and they actually melted through the steel containment vessels. So there was a worst case scenario that they were trying to hide. They even knew that at that time enormous amounts of radiation were released over Japan, and some of it even went over Tokyo. We have images from Los Alamos that show that happening. The U.S. was tracking it and giving the information to Japan, but the Japanese didn't warn their people. They allowed them to remain. Really, that's the reason why Obama came out and publicly said that American citizens should get 50 miles away from the plants. They'd like to retract that if they could. But, as of now, it's just not nearly the same order of magnitude that's coming up, but there is about 1 billion becquerels of radiation per day that are coming off the melted cores. They're still having to pour 10 tons of water over each of the cores every day. They're trying to filter set up elaborate filtration systems to filter out the radiation. But it's kind of jury-rigged, and since the melted cores crack the containment vessel, there really is no containment. So as soon as they pump the water in, it leaks out again. It's just kind of an ongoing process. It's not a good situation. The cores emit so much radiation, gamma radiation, that they actually disassociate the hydrogen and the oxygen in the water that's being pumped in. That creates a danger of a hydrogen explosion, so they are still also actively pumping nitrogen gas into the reactor cores to prevent hydrogen buildup and explosion. So if you consider that a cold shutdown or stable, then you probably work for the nuclear industry.
So you're saying that there is still a danger of a hydrogen explosion?
Yeah, they have to pump. Arnie Gunderson, who's really the guy that can give you the most precise answers. He's a nuclear engineer. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yes.
I try to act as a reporter, but he says that for probably the next 6 or 7 years, they're going to have to continue to pump nitrogen into these cores to minimize the danger of hydrogen explosion, which of course is what blew up the reactor buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4 shortly after the accidents took place.
And so the water is still running out into the Pacific Ocean, and this is going to continue for years.
Well, I think it probably is. How do you quantitate this? They certainly are not giving out much information. There's a lot of groundwater that's pouring into the reactor cores. It's becoming highly radioactive. And, they're right on the coast there. So, the other thing that happened at the time of the accident, you had a long list of questions at the beginning of your introduction, and you mentioned the amount of radiation that went into the Pacific there. The French estimated that something like 733,000 curies of radiation were dumped in shortly after the reactors were destroyed. That's just an enormous amount. And that's of cesium-137, which is a long-lived radionuclide that has a half-life of about 30 years. So that whole area around there has just been terribly contaminated, and that's why you're finding fish, particularly bottom-feeding fish, are going to pick up this stuff, because it didn't all just go out into the Pacific. And a lot of it did, but it's still settled there. And, if it was on land, you could sort of try to create an exclusion zone like they have around the reactor, but, of course, in the ocean, it's not really possible to do that. So I read just the other day they're thinking about putting nets up around there to prevent fishing. I don't know how well that'll work.
Do we know how far the radioactive seawater has traveled so far?
I've seen some images and some projections. I mean, it's all, when you're talking about the Pacific Ocean, you have to base this on currents, but I do think that a lot of it has reached the plume that they call it. I've seen has probably reached somewhere near the Hawaiian Islands in that area of the Pacific.
It's near Hawaii at this point?
Yeah, it looked like from the image that I saw that it's somewhat more north of Hawaii, but and it's, I mean, when you start talking about radiation, when you're in the Pacific Ocean, there is a big dilution effect, but what the nuclear engineers overlook in all of their analysis is what happens when these radionuclides get into ecosystems, because they tend to bioaccumulate in individual organisms, and then they biomagnify as they move up the food chain. And of course, fish don't just stay in one spot, and some of these, as you know, they've caught tuna up in California with cesium in it, so it's not, it's a bad situation, and I've had a real interest in the issue of bioaccumulation in cesium. I've just spent almost 8 months working as a general editor on a study that was done in Belarus with children that live in these contaminated areas around the destroyed Chernobyl reactor. And because much of Belarus, 40% of it was covered with fallout. And they did over 400 autopsies and thousands of tissue samples and found that the cesium becomes very concentrated in the heart and endocrine tissues, as well as the kidneys, the small intestines, pancreas, spleen, and liver. And so what happens is, and see, you can monitor this because cesium is a gamma emitter, so it's gamma radiation you can measure outside of the body. They put these kids on chairs, and they can quickly do they do it in becquerels per kilogram. Becquerel is 1 atomic disintegration per second, per kilogram of body weight. And they were able to correlate, observe pathologies in these children, particularly with their heart, other things too, blood pressure, once they reach certain levels. And most of they had a hard time finding even a control group in Belarus of children that were negative that had 0 becquerels per kilogram, because the foodstuffs become so contaminated in these ecosystems that it's pretty hard to not eat contaminated food.
What are the consequences, long-term consequences of having an accumulation of cesium in your body?
Well, none of it's good. I mean, the thing is, complex life forms didn't evolve in the presence of cesium-137. And so the best analogy I heard was by a Japanese physician saying that these radionuclides they're like a kind of fire you can't put out. We're used to coal and gas and oil, these fires, but because this comes from the breakdown of individual atoms and the energy that comes out of it, you can think of it as a form of fire. But it's destructive to DNA, you can't really dilute it. That's one of the problems. The Japanese are burning the waste. They mix it up, high-level waste with other. They say, well, we're diluting it, but they're diluting themselves to think they could dilute it. But when it gets into your body, these kids. One of the things maybe you've heard of is Chernobyl heart. It breaks your heart to see these videos of these kids with, they have stroke and hypertension and heart attack. 7, 8, 10, 12-year-old kids. It's not uncommon. And, in other words, they have diseases that are more associated with old age. Also diabetes, because when it gets into the pancreas, it destroys the pancreatic cells and the ability to produce insulin. It destroys the glomeruli in the kidney, which is, filters out, so it decreases your ability to excrete the stuff, and it also affects your blood pressure. So a lot of these kids have hypertension. And so less than 20% to excrete the stuff, and it also affects your blood pressure. So a lot of these kids have hypertension. And so less than 20% of the children in these areas of Belarus are considered to be healthy. And that's probably almost 200,000 children. But the World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Agency refused to look at the studies that were done in Belarus by these doctors and scientists. They measured over 100,000 children with this stuff. It And in fact, they even threw the author of the studies into prison for 6 years, which is part of the reason why I've been working on trying to get a viable translation of the study that was done in 2001 to try to make it public.
Is the nuclear industry suppressing these studies?
Well, they do it in a way by what they say is, well, this is not good science. These aren't scientifically done. There's a really interesting video if your listeners want to Google nuclear controversies on YouTube that shows a lot about this, and it shows the kids, and it shows the hearing in Geneva, and all sorts of things that took place back in 2001. My personal opinion is that the safety standards, the ICRP radiation safety standards, almost act to disguise the dangers of internally ingested radionuclides. They develop more for acute exposure for external, but the thing that everybody has missed, and they almost like they don't want to see now, is what happens when the radionuclides get inside living tissue. You can also look at Dr. Tim Masseau at University of South Carolina, and he has a Chernobyl initiative, and he's published over 40 or 50 peer-reviewed studies on the effects of ingested cesium on wildlife populations around Chernobyl, and it's devastating. It's 50% reduction in species and number of bird populations, and it's also done that recently at Fukushima too, and he found even worse consequences there than in Chernobyl.
What about we've seen reports since Fukushima of mysterious die-off of animals, sea life, seals and other animals that have washed up on shore, either dead or with skin lesions or mysterious hair loss.
It's possible. I try to be scientific in the sense of I like to look at data carefully. The anecdotal information should be considered, but I'm pretty solid on these studies that shows that the fact that cesium bioaccumulates, you can get it 10 times higher in your heart and endocrine tissues than you can in your skeletal muscles, and that children, what happens is if you routinely ingest material, foodstuffs that are contaminated with this stuff, and it builds up in your tissues, and you have to. The only alternative to get well is to stop eating it, and if you're a poor person and you live in a contaminated zone, you don't really have that option.
Would you eat tuna out of the Pacific?
I've been trying to avoid it. I like tuna.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, I want to know.
Yeah, well, the thing is, children are much more susceptible to this, and they accumulate it much faster.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. If you look at the Beer studies, the National Academy of Sciences, that female children are 5 times more susceptible than males, and someone between 0 and 1 years old is almost, 7 times, many times more susceptible to radiation damage than somebody who's 30 years old. Sorry, I should have that figure at the tip of my tongue, but even the National Academy studies show that children are many times more susceptible to injury from radiation than adults. And then if you combine that with the fact that they're much more likely to bioaccumulate the stuff in their tissues, it's a real red flag to me. I mean, I see this as, I think we should look at these accidents as like the canary in the coal mine, and in the sense that, we've got 400 and some operating commercial nuclear reactors all around the world, and each one of them's got a huge pile of this spent fuel sitting in a swimming pool next to it. And so, when you talk about an exclusion zone, if we manage to let more of the stuff out, sooner or later there's not going to be places where you can get clean food. So that's why I'm doing this.
Yes, sir.
I think it's really important.
What about Alaskan salmon?
Well, I don't know. All I know is that they've shown that at least from the northern sea of Japan, all of the, anything kelp and anchovies and tuna, it's all contaminated. And but the thing is, our FDA is not making any effort to look at this stuff, and plus we have the highest acceptable exposure rates of anybody, much higher than Japan.
Professor, a few months ago, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton signed an agreement to allow the Japanese to export beef to the United States.
Right. Don't eat it. I mean, it's really a bad thing. You know, the nuclear industry is not too happy with Fukushima when they're trying to create a nuclear renaissance. But, you know, the thing is, there's lots of ways to boil water. And that's all a nuclear power plant does. It's boiling water. It's not some mysterious nuclear electricity that's being created. But when you generate these enormously toxic amounts of byproducts just to boil water, it's a really bad idea. And just to give you an example, in Callaway, at the Callaway nuclear plant, which is 25 miles away from where I live, they have about 770 tons of spent fuel, you know, which is used steel rods. They keep them in the core for 3 years, and they come out and they're a billion times more radioactive than they went in. So they've got to be underwater, or else they'll kill you if you're just within a few feet of them in a matter of seconds. And they also have to be underwater because they're so hot thermally as well as radioactivity that they'll catch on fire. And that's probably what happened at reactor number 4 when the water boiled down. The spent fuel rods started burning and rupturing, and a lot of cesium got released. So there's something like 1,700 rods in the Callaway pool, which was designed to hold 350. And I talked to Bob Alvarez, he's an expert on this. He was at Hanford in North Korea managing, and he said that something like 34 rods have enough cesium in it to make 5,000 square miles uninhabitable for X number of centuries. So, you know, there's 1,700 rods in a pool that's designed to hold 350, and there's other pools that are worse than that. If you go to the Fermi pool in Monroe, Michigan on Lake Erie, that there's so many rods in that, it's filled to capacity that if you lost the electricity to cool it, the water starts to boil in about 4 hours. So that's the largest Fukushima type plant in the United States. We've got 23 of them here. So that we've got a problem, and our spent fuel pools are more full of waste than the Japanese pools were.
Going back to Japan, a final question. What scenario would keep you up at night if you thought there was a likelihood it could happen? You know, regarding Fukushima, its present state.
Well, reactor building number 4, the spent fuel pool there had a fresh load of rods. They had actually taken all the rods out of the reactor core to do some maintenance on it a few months before the tsunami and the earthquake. So there's a huge amount of radiation in that pool, and if that pool is breached, if the buildings collapse or for whatever reason, then it could set off a chain reaction where it would probably make the whole site basically impossible to even access. And then you'd have sort of a chain reaction of more pools boiling off and burning rods, and so that could make most of Japan uninhabitable. And that certainly wouldn't do much for the Pacific Ocean either. In other words, you could have multiple 20 times more radiation release than there already has been. I know they're working to do something about that. Let's just hope they can, you know, they're building a structure over the building, as Arnie Gunnarsson had recommended, and it looks like, you know, in another year or two, maybe 2 years, it might be ready to use. So if they can avoid if we can hope that there's no earthquake that hits it that's worse than the one that they had before, then, you know, hopefully they'll be able to get the rods out of that pond into a different storage facility.
Well, I wish we had some more time. I have a lot of additional questions. We'll have to have you back on the program to continue this discussion. My guest, Professor Steve Starr, he's a senior scientist, physicians for social responsibility. Professor, thank you. Appreciate you answering our questions today.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Professor Starr asked me to make a quick correction to something he said a few minutes ago. When talking about the Callaway nuclear plant, he meant to use the word assemblies instead of rods. There are approximately 1,700 assemblies in the Callaway spent fuel pond, which was originally designed to hold 350 assemblies. He said the cesium in 34 assemblies would make 5,000 square miles an uninhabitable exclusion zone. I appreciate Professor Starr spending time with us to talk about the Fukushima disaster.
is off of AZAZEL 8867. He has zoomed in on this, on that Russian meteor, and he's saying it was a UFO mothership, and he has video proof. So we're going to check it out. Looks good to me, though. Here we go. Let's see. Yep. Look at that. Look at this. Something comes behind it, and then look. Wow. He's also showing you something about how the meteor is flying. Here we go. Let's play it. He's saying it's flying parallel. See how it's flying parallel instead of coming straight in? Oh, there he is. Do you know what I'm talking about yet? Let's see. He's talking about how it runs. The trajectory of this thing is parallel or something. Parallel to the Earth. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to come in straight down. There you go. He's right, I guess. I don't know. There's always an exception to the rule. But, okay. He's going to show you again. Well, that's him. Let's pause. Let's pause this for a second. See how it looks like it's coming straight down in? See what he's talking about? He's right. Look at that. Falling stars coming straight down, not going parallel, not going along, you know, skipping along the atmosphere, going parallel, and leaving that contrail either. Look at that. Then he says that at first there was no contrail. Here, I'll go ahead here. Let's pause that. Here's another shot of some meteors, like meteor showers. Yeah, it should have just... It shouldn't have... The trajectory wasn't right. Check it out. See, it might have been a UFO. Here we go. Let me give you some more information here. See how it came in? Look at the top of the screen. How it came in like that. Like parallel. Should have came straight down. Alrighty then. Let's move on. He has some other good pictures and good things he's talking about here. He's making a lot of sense. Here's what he's going to tell you. When celestial bodies enter our atmosphere, they leave a tail. He goes, tail, a friction tail. Alrighty then. Says it looks like this and this. Yeah, and this. See, it has a friction tail. Alrighty then. There he is again. So he decided to call his friend in Russia and ask them about this event. He started talking about 9/11. I didn't want to, like, add that in there, okay? So, we're talking about UFOs right now. Here it is, with no friction tail. Maybe it's almost high enough that there's no friction yet. I don't think so. I think that's low enough that there would be a friction tail. Why? Because it's probably a UFO. Okay, let's move on. See, there's no friction tail. Okay, he's saying that 3 seconds later, all of a sudden it had a friction tail. So, meteorite, no tail. Of course, they're satellite pictures. And then he says, exact same place with a tail 3 seconds later. Maybe it was high enough in the atmosphere? I don't know. I don't think so. If it's way below the satellites, Very interesting. What's going on with the meteorite in Russia? Let's move on. He's calling it a UFO. Looks like a UFO. Oh, yes. There you go. That was a UFO. Well, they mean spacecraft from another planet. Not that it's unidentified. They're identifying it as a spaceship, mothership, from another planet, galaxy maybe. So, should be an IFO. Alright, let's move on. He says do your math, but there's more. Let's see what else there is. Wow, what kind of transmissions? Oh, that's right. There must be some kind of transmissions that were going over the airwaves. Let's see what he says about that. Okay, let's see what he's saying here. Wow. See, there's something up above it, too. Look at this. Something's behind it, and then it goes bing, 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 bing. Yeah, it's a mothership, I guess. Look at that. Time to leave the mothership. Wow. Look at that. These things are flying out from the ship. Very good. This guy's good. You should check out his channel. He probably has a lot of good stuff on here. Wow. Wow. I don't think he added that. I bet you that was all on there. Look at that. It's a mothership. Alright, what's really going on? Huh. Then there were 9 explosions. That's what he said. Look at that. It's so weird. Alright, here we go again. Wow. I don't think he added to this. This looks pretty real to me. Look up on top, too, of the screen. There's something black up there going across. See it? Look up. Yeah. Up there. At about 11 o'clock. What's that going on? Oh. Oh, for the instant replay. I guess they didn't expect anyone to do that. Look at that. 11 o'clock. There's something way up there at the top of the screen, too. What's that up there? Okay. Now what? Where's transmission? Okay. What's going on? You gonna block it? Why did it go dark? Play that. Alright. This is one of the places where maybe parts of the UFO crashed into. Looks like it. Wow, looks like, I don't know, I'm having trouble myself. Maybe they don't want us to see that. Alright, this is one of the places where maybe parts of the UFO crashed into. Okay, let's pause it. There's another angle of it. Who knows? Having trouble with this channel now. Maybe they don't want us to see it. Alrighty, let's see what else we got here. Hundreds of military were sent to this place. And then it says the Russian ENRC transmission. We can't locate the craft. Whoa! We'd like to hear more of that. So if anyone else can come up with the transmissions of them saying we can't locate the craft, alrighty then. That's it. I just wanted to show you this. This is another update to the meteorite on February 15th, 2013 that went into Russia. Huh. Alrighty then. Moving on to something else now. Just wanted everyone to see that. Heads up! UFO mothership alert. Here is former astronaut explains the UFO cover-up 2013. Stephen HANNARD, ADGUK's channel. But I've seen this interview before. But here we go, just so you see. He fully believes that we are not alone.
I fully believe that we're not alone, and have for many, many years, even though at the time I went to the moon, it was a conventional wisdom, both in science and theology, that we were alone in the universe. We're just barely out of the trees, even though we think we're rather sophisticated. But I do like to tell the story that my great-grandparents came across from southern United States to the west after our Civil War. And I went to the moon less less than 100 years later, they came across in covered wagons. So from covered wagons to going to the moon in less than 100 years in our lifetime is a rather significant event that tells us how primitive we have been until the modern era, and we're still rather primitive. Because of my openness to these things, I did have many of the old-timers in the military and in the intelligence community over the years wanting to get it off their chest before they passed away, allowed me to interview them and talk to them about it. And so my ideas became fairly well solidified. And in fact, we've been visited. We have to remember that right after World War II, the Army Air Force was separated and became the Air Force, a separate branch of service. And that the OSS, which was the Office of Special Services, was disbanded and eventually became the CIA. So that here was a major military organization and a major intelligence organization totally in disarray, new-founded, didn't know what they were doing after World War II, and not really reorganized yet. And as a result of that, the President Truman at that time convened a very high-level committee to examine this alien or UFO phenomenon. They did come to the conclusion that it was alien, and the military rightly came to the conclusion, if they're hostile, there's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, their choice was to deny it and to hush it up and create the National Security Act of 1947, which validated that deception and covered it up and allowed the group to go underground, as it were. And we've been living with that now for 50 years. It is really the beginning of the whole cover-up, the entire denial of this phenomenon. And the addition of dismissal, disinformation, misinformation to cloak and to discourage investigation, to misinform. It's just been continuous for many, many years now. Eventually it came away from the fear, I believe, of not being able to protect and do their duty to the notion of power and control, controlling the knowledge and the technology. And the group involved with that is still doing it. We have created our reality here, and we have created it right now rather badly, for it's not a sustainable reality. We have created, with our science and technology, instead of using it for the greater good, it's been captured by interest, greed, self-service, which is rife. And instead of using it, all of our technology and our brilliance and genius for greater good, we use it for self-service. And that's not going to work. It's important that we look at our civilization, our place in history, use our tools of science for greater understanding, to promote the greater good, and that's what it's all about.